Welcome to At Home with Founders. I'm your host, Jessica, and this is your space to come home to yourself, to your vision, and to the kind of business that you actually want to build. Each episode is a blend of honest conversation, thoughtful reflection, and grounded strategy designed to support you as you build a business that honors your values, your capacity, and the life that you're here to lead. So whether you're listening on a walk, in the car, or in a quiet moment in between it all, take a breath and settle in. And let's have a conversation. Welcome back to another episode of At Home with Founders. Today's guest is Victoria Mercoulier, founder and CEO of Brandwell Designs, a boutique design studio helping 6- and 7-figure female entrepreneurs build brands and websites that truly reflect the reputation that they've worked so hard to earn. What began as a one-woman side hustle has grown into a thriving, all-female agency rooted in helping women show up with clarity, confidence, and intention in their business. Victoria is also the host of the Branding Business School podcast, a top-rated show where she shares honest conversations and actionable strategies for women building brands with purpose. And beyond her work, she is a mom of 3 girls, I don't know how she does it all, and someone who deeply embodies the idea that when you leverage the power of your brand, you can build a business that supports your life rather than one that consumes it. This conversation is such a beautiful look at what it really takes to grow from a side hustle into a company, to step into that leadership role with a team, and to build something that actually aligns with the life that you want. So let's dive in, grab your coffee or tea, and let's get into it. So welcome, Victoria. I am truly honored to have you here
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So before we dive into your journey as a founder, because I just want to get right into the meat of it, I kind of want to start somewhere more personal. So if we were actually sitting face to face together in person on a couch with a cup of tea or your cup of cold coffee there, what season of life does this business era feel like for you?
Honestly, I would say this current season of business feels like a season of discernment. I've built the business, I've proven the concept, and now it's less about saying yes to everything. And it's more about protecting my time, protecting my standards, protecting the caliber of work that we have been come to, be known for. And between leading a team and raising 3 littles, like you mentioned in the intro, like I don't have the luxury of operating reactively anymore. So everything in my business at this current season of time feels like it needs to be really intentional. So I would say that's probably been one of the biggest shifts in this era for me.
I love that. And I totally agree. When you get to a certain point, it's no longer about just taking it all because you're trying to grow. You're now being a little bit more specific with what you're actually pouring your energy and your time into, which is such a great change, but it can be hard to navigate that shift because you've been so used to just taking everything that comes at you and saying yes because you're trying to grow this business. And now saying no actually becomes the challenge.
Yes, exactly.
Has that been really hard for you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm a yes girl through and through, even just in life. If somebody asks me to do a high rocks, like, yes, when is it? I'll be there. Like I just love, I love to seize the moment, to seize the day, like, the concept of living life to the fullest. But every yes has an opportunity cost tied to it. And I think you become more aware of those opportunity costs when your margin is smaller. And like right now, my oldest is only 5, my youngest is only 8 months. So I don't have a lot of margin in life, right? Because like all of my kids are still very dependent on me, and that won't be forever, but currently it is my season. And, I have a business and I'm grateful for the way that I built it. I do have a team, but my team still needs me, even though I'm not needed day to day by all of my clients. Like I'm still very much a present role and a present voice in my business. And so because my margin is just like so slim right now, I'm just recognizing that like saying yes to this opportunity, as exciting as it sounds, is going to cost me time with my family, opportunities to pour into my team, other opportunities that may come down the line that might have greater value tied to them. And that's where I'm trying to really leverage that discernment is what is my best yes in this moment.
Absolutely. There's always going to be a trade-off, so you have to kind of evaluate which one you're more comfortable with, essentially. So let's dive into the very beginning. So I want to start before Brandwell even existed. A
Okay.
lot of people start with a very specific skill set, something that they are very good at, a craft, but not everyone wants to turn that or is able to turn that into a legit business or a company. So when did that shift go from something that you could do as a service to something that you felt responsible to build?
Hmm. I love this question because it is a shift that happens. And from my perspective, like it's a very necessary shift that has to happen for entrepreneurs to go the distance because owning a business is hard. And if your conviction in what you have to offer isn't really strong, like you're eventually going to want to burn it all down and go back to your 9 to 5. So most people assume that I started Brandwell because I just love design and I'm this creative at heart, when really I started Brandwell because I saw what bad design was costing great businesses. And so to share just a little bit of my backstory, even you mentioned we wanted to start before Brandwell came about. So I studied advertising and PR in college, and I fell in love with, the consumer behavior and the psychology of why people buy things. That was just really fascinating to me. And so after I graduated, I went on to work at a marketing agency. And I stayed there for 4 years. I was climbing the corporate ladder. I eventually became the director of websites and online marketing there. And I was managing about 80 accounts. And my role there was to audit my clients' websites and to make design changes and copy shifts and like subtle adjustments on their website, and then track how that would improve the conversion rate of the site. And so that was actually where I learned firsthand that good design is not just about aesthetics. Like good design truly does impact the ROI of a business. And at the same time, as I'm kind of learning all of this and kind of shaping my philosophy on how I feel about branding and website design, it's this boom of like everybody starting their own business. And maybe it was just because I was like graduating college, and a lot of people after they graduate they start their own business, but I feel like all of my friends were starting a photography business, or they were making earrings and they were selling them on Etsy. And I just kind of observed like which ones folded the business in 6 months, and then which ones continually like had success and kept growing. And I recognized that it was very rarely about the one with the better product or the one with the better offer, but it was the one who was perceived as better. The ones who didn't put any attention into their website, they didn't even have a website, into the way that their product was going to be packaged. Like those are the ones that continually just had to compete on price. They were always running discounts, and at some point, it's just not worth your time anymore, right? You can only work so many hours to have a $2 profit margin on the earrings that you're making. And so that's when I really decided, like, okay, I am kind of wrapping up this season at my corporate America job. I knew I wanted to have my own business. But I feel like that's when the conviction kind of just set in that, like, yes, I love design, and I feel like I was gifted in that way, but more so I saw all these friends around me and I was like, I can help you. Like, you have a great offer. It's just nobody knows that because the way that it's presented online is so scrappy, so DIY, that they're not willing to pay what it's worth. And so that was really how I even determined that I wanted to work with women. It was just a natural progression of like, I want to help my friends that are all starting businesses, but most of them aren't able to make it past the 1 year mark because they can't get buyers to pay what the product was worth.
I love that. Okay. That's a different approach to like the need to want to start something, which I think is great and unique. So in those early years, before the positioning was like refined, before you knew exactly what you were going to be doing and how you're going to be showing up as a business, before you have the team that you have now, so you're doing this solo, what were the messiest seasons of Brandwell? What was that like going on behind the scenes that maybe didn't become apparent from the outside, because we see this like polished version for the most part, but what was
Yeah.
actually going on beneath the surface?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not always polished, even today, 8 years later. Looking back to when it was just me, and really just a little bit more backstory into how I started. So I was working at that marketing agency. I found out I was pregnant. My husband and I were expecting our first child. And that was like my ticket out of corporate America. So I had been side hustling Brandwell. But then as soon as I found out I was pregnant, I was like, wait, this is my chance. This is my chance to like see if I can get this off the ground. And I wanted to take the like 50 to 60 hours a week I was working for somebody else and see if I rerouted that energy into my own business, if I could really turn it into something. And so the day after I found out I was pregnant, I called my boss, I put in my notice, and I told my boss before I told my mom. And that was when I recognize that, like, okay, I have 9 months to figure this out before my priorities change, my hours in a day change, my ability to sit behind my laptop for 10 hours at a time is going to be gone with a newborn. And so I actually started hiring like right away. But even then, just because you hire someone doesn't mean that your life or your business is organized. So I would say the messiest phase was that first year, that maybe even the first 2 years of building and just saying yes to things I had no business saying yes to. We all do it. I think there's probably people like nodding along right now if you're, a few years into your business and you finally kind of refined your lane and what you are known for. But I would say yes to projects on Showit. I would say yes to projects on Shopify. Like literally, if you needed a website, I was going to be your girl. And those platforms were not my expertise. But at the time, it didn't matter because I was willing to stay up late and watch YouTube videos or take a course and, pour hours and hours and hours into learning a new platform just for one client, which now I know is not the most strategic use of time. And it's not even helpful when it comes to branding. But you only know what you know at the time, and each season of business kind of shapes you and prepares you for the next season. So even the messy season, like I'm super thankful for it because by saying yes to things that I had no business saying yes to, I learned some really hard lessons. For instance, I'll share one of them just to kind of give a little bit more light onto what I'm getting at. But I had one contract designer on my team who designed Showit websites. The rest of my team, we were all Squarespace designers. Still today, 8 years later, Squarespace is our platform. And I remember one client coming in and saying like, oh, but I really want a Showit website. I'm like, that's great. I've got somebody, on my team that can do that for you. But I didn't know the platform myself. I wasn't familiar with it. And at this stage of the business, I had one baby and a couple of team members, and I wasn't fully like able to pour myself into learning a new platform. But I didn't think that would matter because I had a team member, and that team member ended up leaving mid-project. And it was such a good lesson in business because I ended up having to go and spend way more than what the client spent with me to hire an expert Showit designer to finish the project. Because I still cared about, the client and their investment, and I wanted to do right by them. I think building my reputation was way more important to me than the dollar signs in the beginning. But that was just like a really good lesson of like, okay, if you're going to say yes to something, like, do you have the means to fulfill it and to fulfill it well? And if not, there's a lot of risk tied to that yes that not a lot of entrepreneurs recognize early on. So that was just one example of a really messy season for me, but we overcame, we got on the other side of it, and that client ended up having a beautiful website. It just cost me a lot of money.
Okay, there's lots that I want to unpack there. So first of all, like I totally agree. When you never want to have critical information just live in one person on the team, because you have no control over that individual becoming sick, getting in a car accident, choosing to leave rather abruptly mid-project, like that's not ideal. And then you're stuck in a situation where that knowledge just walks right out the window. So I definitely can relate to that challenge. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about was you forfeited your mat leave in corporate. You put in your notice, which taking that leap alone brings up so many emotional things, right? Like that come up, but you're doing it at the most vulnerable point in your life where, growing a human brings up a lot of emotions, and there's just so much more that comes up during that season. And you're doing that alongside of building a business. And you get to that, so say 9 months later, you get to that point where, like, okay, so I have clients coming in, you had a team member going, but now you need to take mat leave. Like, you've built it, and you need to keep the momentum going at that point because it's so early.
Mm-hmm.
But now you need that time off with your baby. So, like, how are you feeling emotionally during that period of time, and like what helped you get through such a challenging season? Because I can't even imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Forfeiting the maternity leave, looking back, like, was that the smartest thing to do? No, but I also still think it was the right call because every day mattered during that pregnancy. I knew what I was in for. Even though it was my first baby, I lived 10 minutes away from my sister at the time. She had had 4 kids before I had my first, and I was very present part of all of her, maternity and postpartum seasons. And I just knew what I was in for. And I knew the type of mom that I wanted to be. And I just didn't want my plate to be so full that I couldn't enjoy that newborn season. And so a lot of people would look at my timing and say, like, man, that's bad timing. Like, it's incredible that you built this business in spite of that. But I look at it and say, like, I built this business because of that, because it gave me such a unique lens in which to view the decisions I was making as I was building Brandwell in those early days that I otherwise wouldn't have had. I didn't have the luxury of like building really scrappy. I was on a timeline from the beginning. Some founders have like a certain amount of capital that's going to run out that really motivates them and it puts a fire under them to like get something off the ground. And for me, it was I'm having a baby in June, and I want to make sure that this business can stand on its own 2 feet before that time comes so that I can. And now my maternity leave was like a week. I didn't take a 6-week maternity leave off of my brand new business. But I did build something that could run. The day to day was managed with, just me checking in. I wasn't involved so closely in the deliverables where I was able to step back and like have a baby. And those first few months are really hard. If you've had kids, and it hits different every baby, but like that first one for me was by far the hardest postpartum season. My world just got flipped upside down, but yeah, I'm really grateful for that timing because I feel like I just built Brandwell very intentionally, very strategically. Even the fact that I hired so early on, hiring in the conversations that I have with founders seems to be such a hang up for so many people. There's such fear tied to it, right? And so they never do it. And because they never do it, their growth potential is always capped because they only have so many hours in a week, right? But for me, I got over that fear early. And honestly, I had a lot of naivety around it. So that was nice because it was like ignorance is bliss. I didn't really know what can go wrong when you're hiring and how people create more problems. But I'm really grateful that I did hire very early on because that's really what ended up building Brandwell into what it is today. I removed myself almost instantaneously from being the product. I was the face of the business. I was very much the visionary of the brand, and I still am, but I wasn't the brand, right? Like I haven't had this like awkward conversation with every client that comes into Brandwell about like, oh, well, are you not designing my website? They just know. They know because I'm very transparent on my website about my team, and my team has really kind of been brought into the whole Brandwell ethos of like, this is our brand. It's this all female team of girls that you're going to love working with, come as a client, leave as a friend. And that started in the first year of Brandwell. Whereas I think maybe if I weren't pregnant when I was building the business, and then if I didn't go on to have, 3 babies in 5 years, I might have held a little bit tighter control. I might have stayed in the weeds for longer. And then I think if you're in the weeds, you just can't plan for what's next.
Absolutely. So interesting. It's just such a unique journey, and I just love diving into that. So we kind of talked about being in the weeds a little bit here, and that's where most founders, start. They're very much stuck in the day to day because they are doing it all, but they want to be the visionary. They want to step out, but they also don't want to become replaceable. So they feel like when they do hire a team, there's this feeling of like, well, they don't need me anymore. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot more under the surface. So did stepping into that CEO role ever force you to confront any of your own attachments to being needed?
Yes, and I revisit these emotions like every year, at least once. One time recently that I felt this again was my third baby was just born in July of 2025, and I took a proper maternity leave, really for the first time, but like 6 weeks off. I'll touch base with my managers via text like once a week, but like that's it. Don't call me. And we went on to have our highest grossing sales month in July. And I remember thinking like, wait a second, like I'm not marketing, I'm not on sales calls, like my team is like running this show, and the business is not only maintaining, but it's growing. And so most people would be like, yeah, Victoria, that's the goal. But for me, it did kind of like internalize as like, wait, what does this mean? Like, am I not important to the growth of the business anymore? And that's certainly not the case, but there is a difference between being needed and being valuable. And especially in the early stages, like when you are everything in the business. So stepping back can feel like you're removing the very thing that's made this business what it is. But what I have learned now, I've had team members for 7 years almost, is that real leadership isn't about being needed for everything. It is about building something that doesn't rely on you for every single decision. And this is still something that I am learning day to day. I was literally chatting with my business mentor yesterday about this. And she was just encouraging me, like, when your employees come to you with more of like a day to day decision, if they keep coming to you, it's because you keep giving them solutions. And you're probably doing that because it feels good, right? It feels good to be needed. It feels good to come in and solve the problem. But when you do that, you're not building something that can run apart from you and your strategic thinking. And that's not scalable, that's not sellable. So, if you want to have a bigger picture and a long-term plan for success, you have to be willing to kick it back to them. And my employees will tell you this all the time, but they'll ask me a question and I'll be like, what do you think we should do? Like, I just say that all the time. And I know it drives them nuts, but I promise I'm doing them a favor because my boss did that to me too. I would ask him, hey, Neil, what do you think I should do about this client? They're upset. And he would just say, what would you do? And then I would tell him, and he would say, I trust you. And actually, that is so much more rewarding to the employee to be able to present their solution and have it be affirmed by their boss than if their boss just told them what to do. It gives them a lot more just empowerment to go on now and make the next decision and then the next decision. And so definitely I would encourage that CEO who's afraid of like not being needed or who's afraid of getting out of the weeds. There will come a day where you're resentful that you didn't. So the sooner that you start, the better, because it's not that you're not even going to be needed anymore, but like what you're needed for changes. So for me, I have to continually remind my team, like, hey, my job description now is CEO. Like, I am doing business development, big picture. So when you're always asking me these day-to-day things, you're pulling me off of my post. And if I'm not in my post, who's developing the business? Who's casting the vision for the next stage of what's going to come down the pipeline here? And that's really important for the longevity of a business.
Absolutely. I love how you're developing that critical thinking muscle for them. That is so important. And you become a crutch. If you
Mhm.
constantly just be the solution giver, essentially, you become a crutch for your team and they're not able to think on their own. But you're also not able to coach them and guide them to coming to the right solution. You know what I mean? Like it's all about helping them take full ownership over that role so that you can fully step out of it and only be brought in when it's absolutely critical. I love that you are doing that. Now, what parts of the business did you ever feel like were the hardest for you to let go of, to hand off to a team member, whether that, was more of the design or the creative direction or, anything like that? What was that experience for you?
I hired designers on a gradient. So like when I made my first hires, they were contract designers and they were white labels. So they didn't have any front end communication with my clients. So I would say that was probably the thing I was most nervous to give up control was communication. Because again, like reputation was everything to me, like getting that 5-star review, like I would have done anything to get that 5-star review in those early days. And so what I did is like I hired somebody, I would have the call with the client, do all of the strategy. I would kind of give the designer like the brief and say, okay, this is the direction, this is the vision. You design it, they would design it. I would present it to the client. And I did that until I felt really confident in who I had hired. So that's just one way if you are in the design space. Like that's a good way to test the waters without maybe exposing your brand's reputation too soon, before you feel ready. Um, and it's all about who you hire. Like that fear at some point becomes a you problem. If the fear never goes away, then like you have to ask yourself, like, what's more important to me, having control or a bigger business, right? And time freedom. But if you're hiring the right people, that fear should be short lived. I have so much confidence in my designers now in the way not only that they design, but in the way that they communicate with my customers. Literally, like every once in a while, a client who maybe found us on Google or something, they'll ask like, oh, will you be the one designing? And I almost laugh and I'm like, trust me, you don't want me designing your website. It has been like 5 years since I have designed a website start to finish. And I can say that because like I just trust my team so much. I know that they're going to do a much better job than even I could do. And that's really important, whether you're hiring for that or another thing that was really, really hard to give up was sales. And I haven't given up sales completely. I think it's very important for the founder to stay in touch with who's choosing you, why are they choosing you, what are their hesitations before they choose you. I think those are just things I never want to fully remove myself from. But after I had my second baby, I actually was not planning on giving up sales. And when I say giving up sales, I mean, every time somebody inquires, we get on a discovery call and then we walk them through a demo and then we send a proposal. And I did all of that. But I had my second baby and I was on my maternity leave, and my COO, Lauren at the time, who's still my COO today, she came over to meet my baby. And we had quite a few inquiries come in, of course, like while I was in the hospital giving birth. And I was like, Lauren, like, I thought I'd be up for this, but like, I am just not up to like get on a call this week. I just can't do it. And I was like, I know that you know Brandwell like the back of your hand. Like you've watched me do this for so many years. Like, would you be willing? And she closed that first sale. And it was such a euphoric moment for both of us because for her, like she was just really excited to make me so proud. Like my boss just had a baby. She's home. She's recovering. She trusted me with a really big thing for Brandwell, thousands of dollars worth of revenue potential. And I nailed it. And I sold the client. And yeah, so that was like an unexpected thing that my season of life forced me to let go of. And now Lauren and I share that role about 50-50. And I'm so grateful because that's allowed me to like truly take a vacation, and not my vacations were always with the caveat of unless a lead comes through, right? Then I need to stop and I need to just take a quick phone call. But now I can say, okay, Lauren, anything that comes in between now and April 15th, you take it. And that's such a gift. But trust me, like giving up that first conversation, that first face-to-face interaction with a potential client who wants to invest in you, and that call is going to decide whether they do or not, like that's tough. But I feel really confident in who I hired and in how I trained them. Like having a strategic onboarding process will also help to alleviate some of those fears.
Absolutely. I love that. I'm so happy that it worked out, especially at that critical point after giving a baby or giving birth to a baby. So we kind of talked a little bit about hiring here. So I kind of want to dive a little bit into at the start, you hire to help to lighten the load. You don't really have a plan for the most part. People don't really understand what it takes to really build out to the team structure for long-term growth. At what point did that shift for you from like just bringing people on to increase your capacity for more versus now looking at the business? I mean, like, okay, this is our North Star. This is where we're wanting to go. This is what we need to have at that level in order to support where that would be. What are the stepping stones from a team structured organization wise do we need to take in order to get there? So what was that like for you?
Probably the biggest shift was when I shifted from having only contractors to having full-time salaried employees. And that happened in 2022 for me. So that happened right after I had my second baby. And I realized that my time was increasingly more valuable. My margin was small. And I needed my contractors to act more like employees. Like I needed them to be answering calls from 8 to 5. I needed them to, I didn't want to like run something by them before I could close the client. Like in those early days of Brandwell, I would like have a call with a potential customer and then I'd check with my designer and say, hey, this is looking like it's going to come down the pipeline. Would you be available to start this design next week? But I had to get approval before I could then go and close that sale. And that just wasn't in line with the direction that I wanted to go. And I've said it a few times now, but like reputation, experience was really everything to me. It still is. Like that is one of the biggest differentiators that we can bring to the table at Brandwell is like, yes, we're going to design you a fabulous website. Yes, we're going to give you killer brand assets, but like we are going to give you such a unique and tailored and personalized experience over the month or two that we're working together that like you're not going to want to leave. Like we have clients say like I'm just sad that it's over. Like I just have loved, these weekly conversations, and that was so important to me, and I felt that I didn't have as much control over my client experience with contractors. And so what was hard though is I had maybe 5 or 6 contractors at the time, but 2 of them were carrying the bulk of the burden. 2 of them were probably working like 20 to 35 hours a week consistently. And so I decided, and again, this was kind of a crazy decision. There's a lot of things about my journey that don't make sense, but I decided to bring them both on at the same time, literally the same day, as full-time salaried employees. So suddenly my overhead expenses went from like pretty moderate to like significant. And that did put a lot of pressure on the business, but it also took a lot of pressure off of me because now I had some strategic thinkers. Now I wasn't the only person responsible to kind of carry the weight of some of the decisions that had to happen day to day. And so the day that I hired them as my full-time employees, I gave them management titles and I started to build the org chart. So I had, okay, Lauren is COO, you run all of the operations. Libby is chief design officer, you manage the design team. So Lauren started helping with sales and onboarding and all of the administrative things, sending out proposals. And then Libby trained any new designers that were coming in. She stepped in if a client needed extra design help. And still today, both of those girls are in those roles 4 years later. And we've had a lot of people come through, our doors. And that has been amazing because after I had my second kid, like honestly, the idea of having to train a new employee is like that unravels me, but I don't have to. I mean, I can, come in and make sure that they understand Brandwell at its core and our mission and our vision and our values. But in terms of training them on the day to day, how we operate our systems, my managers take care of that. And that has really alleviated a lot of pressure. And it's taken, again, that fear out of like why I wouldn't otherwise hire. I can hire now because I've trained other people to get the new hires onboarded smoothly.
I love that. So we're still on the topic of team here, and I've read that you do team retreats. So let's talk about like the team culture aspect, because it's one thing building a team, but then looking at the culture that you are building within your business and making sure that the team understands it and contributes to that as well. So what has team retreats really taught you about culture within your business that maybe Slack messages and emails and weekly team meetings could never actually do?
Yeah. Our team retreats are so fun. Most of my girls are scattered around the country. It didn't start that way. We actually all started in Virginia, and then slowly everybody moved for relationships or family. And I recognize how much I missed that in-person connection. And even just myself, like as a mom with 3 little babies, like I don't get out much. And I really miss that. And I think we're all starting to feel this more so in the wake of AI and what it's done and how many things it's automated. But like the difference between intentional and automated is very obvious now. And there's a very real void, I think, happening for a lot of people that humans once filled and only humans can fill. And really that's the goal of these retreats. It's like, yes, we're going to meet every week and have fun, and I'll buy you coffee before our meeting and we'll like yap on Google Meet for an hour. But something about being in person, it's just different. And really, I interviewed my COO on my podcast years ago, and I remember something that she said. But she said, the people that you work with and for make all the difference in how you view your job. And I remember after that call, I was kind of replaying what she had said and thinking, like, she didn't just say who you work for. We've all heard that who you work for determines like how much you love your job. But she said who you work with. And my team, my girls, so many of them have stayed with me for so many years. Like Libby and Lauren have been with me for 6 years, and a lot of the other girls have been with me for 2 or 3 or 4. And so we're all going to these retreats year after year, and it's really allowed some genuine friendships to build. I used to work for a marketing agency that did retreats, and like I was not friends with anyone on that team. I had one friend, and she actually now is my sales mentor. But it was kind of like something you had to do to like check it off of a box, and you couldn't wait to get back to your husband and kids. But with Brandwell, like I truly think that the girls look forward to these trips. I think that they want to be there. And I recognize that it's my job to curate that experience. The same way I curated an exceptional experience for my clients, I want to curate that same experience for my team, because if they're not getting that, they're not going to give that. And that's really important. Like if I want them to give a 5-star experience to my clients, I need to show them what that looks like and how I treat them.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. So we're going to jump back to motherhood, because I think when you become a mom, a lot of things change. A lot of views change on life in general. So you maybe had some sort of ambition at the start, and now that's shifted for you. So, when it comes to ambition, when it comes to urgency over certain types of things, or what success actually looks like for you, how has that shifted from the start to now being a mom of 3?
First, success is going to be measured differently by everyone. Like I'm sure what success looks like for you and your business, Jessica, is a little bit different than what it looks like for me and my business. But as far as having kids, I can say with all certainty that with every kid, my time became more valuable, and that raised my standards for Brandwell, for the opportunities that I say yes to, for the events that I'll travel to, for the clients that I want to work with. If they weren't aligned, like it was out. And I shared this early on in our conversation about I feel like I'm in a season of discernment. And it's because of my season of life. I think there will be a time probably in the next few years where I get to say yes to more opportunities, and I don't have to think so critically about what's my best yes right now, because I'll have a little bit more time when my kids are in school. But I'm unwilling to miss these like years that go by so fast. Like, my oldest is already in kindergarten. She'll be going into first grade here in a matter of weeks. And I'm like, whoa, I just brought her home. Like, and I know everyone says this and it's so cliche, and I hate to even like say it because it just sounds so, overused, but it is true that the first 5 years go by so quickly. And then if you choose to send your kids to school, which for me, homeschool's not in the cards at the moment, they're gone. They're gone for 40 hours a week, and you suddenly have that time back. And so I'm really trying hard. And I'm not saying that I do this perfectly. I mess up all the time, and I'll call my mom crying, being like, am I a good mother? But if you can keep the perspective of like, this is just a season, and then they go to school. And actually the season that they're in school is way longer than the season that they're out of school. And so if I can just try and keep that perspective, it does allow me to really funnel my decisions through the lens of, is this right for me and my family and my team right now? But what I will say, a byproduct of that is, I think my kids are what made me get really strategic about my yeses. It's done a lot of good things for my brand, because brand positioning is all about becoming the obvious choice for a select group of people. But it's really hard as an entrepreneur to want to alienate anyone, or to want to, say no to an opportunity, because we see dollar signs, we see visibility, we see exposure. But in reality, whether it's kids that are forcing you to say no, or you're committed to positioning your brand strategically, when you say no, you get more aligned clients, and your clients are your walking portfolio, and they tend to send more people like themselves. So for me, saying no to certain projects or opportunities and saying yes to the ones that felt really aligned has actually had a really positive effect on my brand, because now it's like we're becoming known for a more specific type of clientele that we serve, a higher caliber clientele. And it wasn't all intentional. I'd love to say that it was, but a lot of that was just a byproduct of I didn't have enough time. So I was more strategic with my yeses. And even if you do have the time, I think being strategic with your yeses is one of the best things that you can do for your brand.
I love that. That's such good advice. So people take note, because that's just nuggets, gold nuggets. I want to dive. I know we're getting close to time here, but I want to dive into the expertise, because you just have so much knowledge and you've built such an incredible business. So let's talk about branding and all that type of stuff. So what do founders most often blame on their marketing, whether or that's maybe also weak sales processes, when the real issue is actually their brand, how they're showing up online, their website, and how it's currently structured and laid out before, that point where the trust is actually eroded. You know what I mean? Like, what actually is the issue?
Yeah. I call that a perception gap. And I love this. Now we're getting into my favorite topic, but a perception gap is when the quality and the caliber of the business that you're actually running is not what's represented online. And I always say, every marketing dollar that you spend is only as good as the brand and the website that it leads to, because people make decisions based off of perception, not reality. I used this example on Instagram stories the other day, but I went to Starbucks and I wanted to get a blueberry muffin to go with my oat milk shaken espresso. And the muffin was sitting there in that glass case and it looked so good. It looked extra good. It had like the extra crumbles on top and it was like just speaking to me in the moment. And so I added that to my order. What is like a $4 muffin these days? And so after I ordered it and after I paid, I see the girl, she doesn't go reach for that juicy one that was speaking to me. She goes in the back, she grabs one out of a plastic bag and she opens it up and pops it in a microwave to warm it up. And I was like, ooh, like suddenly I no longer wanted the muffin. And I think this is a really good way to paint the perception gap analogy, because it's like, if your business is represented as DIY or early stage because your business grew, but you never really took time to invest in the website or the online appearance, then it's like setting the plastic bag in the display case. People aren't going to buy it. It's the same muffin. It's the same dang muffin. People aren't willing to spend that money though, because of the perception, right? And so if we can change the perception, which for Starbucks, that just meant opening the wrapper and setting it on the tray. It didn't have anything to do with changing the ingredients of what was there. We can increase sales. And this is the gap that so many founders get stuck in, because, and I get it, like I've been in a scaling stage for the last 7 years, and it is hard to keep up with all the things that you could and should be doing as a business owner. I never feel like I make it to the end of my to-do list. And so it's hard to know, what do I prioritize, right? Is it social media? Is it podcasting? Is it going to in-person events? But I feel so strongly that if you just think of the way that you make decisions nowadays, you maybe hear about a service provider, and then what do we do next? We look them up on social media and we kind of vet them there. Do they have a personality that we like? Do we like their content? Does it feel like it was made for us? And then if that passes the test, what do we do next? We go to their website. And the website should be the thing that seals the deal. This should be stage 3, the referral, the social media, the website. Like that's the most common for service providers. That's the most common pattern of somebody making a buying decision. And if the website creates the doubt, it's that friction point. Now you have an uphill battle. Your sales cycle is longer. People are giving you pricing objections. And but I think we forget about that. We think like, oh, but I'm getting leads, right? And so we keep doing the things to get visibility. We keep posting on social media, or we even invest in SEO, but we haven't fixed what's broken. And that's why it's like every marketing dollar, for a lot of it, you're paying to have people underwhelmed by your business. And that's what makes me sad. That's why I have so much conviction in what I do for Brandwell, because I know how much it costs to do SEO. I know how much it costs to hire a social media manager. Like, I've paid for all of that for the last 8 years, and it's a high ticket. And if I wasn't confident that that marketing effort was going to put them on a place that was going to accurately represent my business and the quality of service that I had to offer, it would be a lot harder to pay those invoices at the end of the month, right? So closing that perception gap is such a necessary thing for founders to recognize. Now, early on, if you're, just building your portfolio and you throw together a DIY website as your starting point, great, we all do it. We all have a scrappy startup story for the most part. But when it starts to really become a liability for the business is when now your business has refined, your pricing has increased, you're trying to attract a higher caliber client, and you're getting frustrated because you're not able to, or as soon as you attract them, they ghost you. That's because there's a perception gap. You never updated the brand or the website to be in alignment with the business that you're actually running today.
So let's say the brand looks pretty. You get comments all the time that your aesthetic is beautiful, but it's not translating into anything. What would you say in that situation?
If it's not translating, I would ask what level of strategy took place when designing your brand. Something that I explain to every prospective client of Brandwell is the difference between a graphic designer and a brand strategist, because there's a big difference and most people don't know that there is a difference at all. But a graphic designer's end game is just aesthetics. Like, if this looks good and you like it, then I did my job, I'm happy, pay me, and here you go. A brand strategist tracks the success of a project by how it performs, right? So we're making design decisions based on competitive context, based on target audience, based on data, based on your price point, and who this brand is really meant to resonate with. But a lot of people, like, we all can go into Canva and make something look pretty these days. Like, the barrier is pretty low to designing something pretty, but pretty is not the standard when it comes to branding. Your brand is meant to serve as a lead magnet for people to instantly be able to decide, are they credible? Are they trustworthy? And more importantly, is this for me? Does it feel like it was for me? And so if you designed your brand for you, but your target audience isn't exactly like you when it comes to preference and what they like and what they're drawn towards, then that brand is not going to pull its weight for your business.
Okay, I love that. Now, you've said pretty branding, essentially without a strategy, it's not going to pay the bills, it's not going to bring the clients in. So what are the clearest signs that a founder has invested in just solely aesthetic, but maybe not the positioning, the messaging, the buyer psychology and whatnot? Like, what is actually going to make that light bulb go off and be like, okay, I need to actually work on this now?
You're continually attracting the wrong clients, or you're getting a little bit of everything, right? Or people aren't willing to pay your price point. You're getting a lot of interest that's not converting. And that's because people don't pay premium prices to work with generalists, right? They want you to be a specialist. They want you to solve their problem, not everyone's problem. And I think this is like a big thing happening currently online, particularly in the female founder sector, where we're all using ChatGPT to like help us position our offer and solve a problem, but everyone is trying to like solve world peace. Like, I think we're putting too much weight in what we do, and therefore it's making consumers that much more skeptical, because they're like, wait a second, I know that you're not actually. I saw this week, and it just bothered me, but it's going to help to prove this point. I saw a post just this week on social media, and it said, you could make $100,000 this week. I'm like, okay, yes, you could. You could. I'm curious to hear her strategy behind that. Most people that are going to interact with that post are not going to make $100,000 in a week, right? And so for me, like I've been around the block a time or two. I own a business. Like I can see right through that marketing message. That totally falls flat on me, right? Like if anything, I'm repelled because that feels like a grandiose promise that there's no chance you're going to deliver on. And now I feel like you're trying to capitalize on my naivety, which doesn't feel good, right? So I think if founders would just get a little bit more specific about the problem that they actually do solve, there would be less skepticism because now it's not too good to be true. Like at Brandwell, if you're not getting any leads right now, working with Brandwell is not going to guarantee that you do. But if you're getting the wrong type of leads, if your business has been in business for a few years, you've proven the concept, but you know that there's this perception gap and you're really wanting to raise your rates, but you don't want to do so until you close this gap, I can help you. That's my lane of specialty, right? And I've done this over 600 times with other female founders to back up the fact that I can help you. But if I go out here and say, I'm going to increase your sales by 6 figures this year by building you a new website, and I don't have any context as to, what current stage your business is in, what your offers are, who your audience is, what's happening in your industry right now, then that's such an empty promise and people can see through that. So I would love to see more people just getting a little bit more specific and honest about what they can help their clients do. And I think it will solve a lot of the problems of people, showing interest and then leaving, because a lot of people, I think they show interest and then they realize like, oh, you're trying to solve everybody's problem. And like, I have a very specific problem that I need addressed right now. And I'm not confident that you're the one can address it. But if you get on that call with them and you start speaking their language and you can like almost tell them before they tell you exactly what their pain points are, because you've heard it so many other times from people before, that is going to be so reassuring to them. They're going to be like, oh, she gets me. She's done this before. She can help me. And that's what closes a sale.
I love that. That's so true. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about your daughters and all of this that they're seeing or they're witnessing you do. So when your daughters are old enough to fully understand all that you've done, all that you've built with your business, what do you hope that they say that you modeled for them specifically? Not just about the business, but about being a woman, being in leadership, leading a team, self-trust in yourself, because building a business it's so hard and it really does take a lot of self-trust to do so. So what do you hope that they took away from this experience watching you?
My answer is probably not going to be what you thought or maybe even what you want, because it might not be a good soundbite answer. But honestly, when my kids grow up, I just want them to say my mom was always there. Like my mom, I'm going to get emotional talking about this because like this is so important to me. But like my mom owned an interior design business when I was growing up, but like I don't even think I understood that she had a business. Like she was a stay-at-home mom in my opinion. And it really wasn't even until I started my own business that I was like, wait a second, like you were an entrepreneur. You had that business, didn't you? But she was just always there. She was always there to pick me up at 3:00 when school got out. She was at every tennis match. And like that mattered so much more to me. I think even more than her modeling like good work ethic or how to prioritize family whilst also juggling a career. And I think like naturally she had 3 daughters that all went on to start their own businesses. So she did something right. She modeled something right for us. My dad was an entrepreneur too, and I want to give credit there as well. But I call my mom every day. I'm 33 and I've got 3 kids of my own, and I call her every day. And I think we have the relationship that we do because she was so present. She was emotionally available whenever I needed her. She was physically available whenever I needed her. And that's why I'm so, or at least I'm trying to be so careful about my priorities in this season, because I want my girls to call me every day when they're in their 30s, and I think that maybe the world needs less of, female empowerment and this is what you can become if you do all of this, right? And it just needs moms to recognize that like this is a rare season where there's so little and they have so much dependence on me, and I want to be there for them. And it is hard, it is really hard. And I don't want to like negate or belittle the duality of working motherhood, because I have been doing this for almost 6 years, and It's been something that has like grown me so much personally too. And again, I think that's making me a better mom, even just like the struggles and the resilience that I've had to develop through Brandwell are teaching me just like resilience in life. And that's a really important skill that I want my daughters to have. I want them to grow up to be resilient because life is hard. So there's certainly like skills and things that I want to pass down to them. But more than anything, like I would measure this season of life as successful if they say that my mom was always there. That's how I'm trying to continue to build my business in such a way that I can always be there.
I love that. That was beautiful. So that is a wrap on today's conversation. I want to thank you, Victoria, for having this open and honest conversation about your journey and just sharing so candidly about what was going on behind the scenes that we often don't get a window into. So if this episode, for those tuning in, resonated with you, we'd love to hear from you. So tell everybody where they can find you online so that they can connect with you.
Yes. Well, brandwelldesigns.com is our website. You can learn a little bit about everything that we do there. And then on Instagram, Brandwell Designs. I do love stories. I'm a true millennial, so you can find me on stories over there just about every day.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you, Victoria, for joining us.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you for being here. At Home with Founders is more than a podcast. It's a space for thoughtful, intentional women building businesses that are meant to last. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who would feel supported by this conversation. And if you're craving deeper support, guidance, or structure inside your business, you can always find me at Haven Oaks. Until next time, keep building in a way that feels like home.